thank you for taking the time to chat with me. I'm really grateful for that. I mean, you are definitely one of the top researchers within this field of social studies of finance. So maybe we can start off with you just explaining what social studies of finance really is.
Right. The label social studies of finance is really a translation from the French of an association that was set up in mid-90s, maybe, I'm not sure about that, by some sociologists in France, among which there was Fabian Muniesa and a couple of others. And I got to meet Fabian through his PhD advisor, Michel Calon, who was friends and intellectual collaborator with my PhD supervisor, Donald Mackenzie. So that was the connection. And we realized that we're doing something similar, applying sociological ideas related to actor network theory and also generally materiality to the study of financial markets. So I kind of took up the label of their association, but it's really, I suppose it's SSF, social studies of finance, but this is it. These are the intellectual origins of what became social studies of finance. At the same time, also German sociologist Karen Knorr was working on similar things. So we got together. I'm trying to think when all of us got together. I was a PhD student at the time, and American sociologist David Stark had a workshop. He invited Calon, he invited Donald Mackenzie, he invited a few others. Donald couldn't come. And he said, yeah, Yuval, you're interested in the same thing. Why don't you go to New York? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go to New York. And the connections began forming. And then, as you move up in academia, I had a postdoc after my PhD, and I told Fabian if he wanted to come to London to also do a postdoc. I spoke with Susan Scott, who was in information systems. All of us were at the London School of Economics at the time. And then, you see what I'm saying? Basically, it's the usual story of such intellectual movements. Coming out of that was a book we edited together called Market Devices, to which Fabian and Calon and myself wrote the introduction. And kind of people don't care about the papers, which is a shame. The papers are really nice, but everyone cites the introduction, where we speak about market devices, like, if you like, clumps, or I don't know what you call them, clusters of machines, humans, and rules that basically make up markets. So it's a very partial, kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but this is a little description of social studies of finance.
Yeah, thank you for that. Where did you do your PhD?
I did my PhD in a unit called the Science Studies Unit at the University of Edinburgh, which is a unit that studies sociologically scientific disciplines. So people with me were working on sociological and historical research of, I'm trying to think, of mad cow disease, or history and history of the mathematical development in the Renaissance. You see, so it's a very unique unit in that sense. And I gotta say that I was kind of an outsider there, because nobody cared at the time about studying financial markets. I mean, outside finance departments, it was like, why do you even care about that? It was something that people thought was pretty banal. And also it had like a bad odor in sociological circles. You study rich people, you study capitalism, you're not really critical about it. What are you selling out? Kind of, yeah.
Right, sort of the other side, in a sense.
Yeah, exactly, the other side. Yeah, to a large extent.
So when you applied for your PhD, did you know that you wanted to look at financial markets during your
No, I
time when you
didn't.
already started?
I sent a research proposal to Donald Mackenzie because I really loved this book, Inventing Accuracy, which was sociological or STS. STS is Science Technology Studies, an STS approach to studying the navigation systems of nuclear missiles. And I wanted to work on the development of computer chips. So very much, science and technology. Within the first few months of my PhD, I realized that it's not going to work because I didn't know enough. I thought I knew enough, but I didn't know enough about how to, the engineering of computer chips. It's very, highly technical. And secondly, much of the information was proprietary and was not accessible. So I remember maybe about 3 to 4 months in, Donald gave me a folder. So we're talking, this is prehistorical times, huh? People would actually read newspapers, and he would cut out all kinds of interesting things that he thought would be interesting. He said, well, there are some ideas over there. Check them out. So I wrote a research proposal and I submitted it, to Donald, but then we realized it's not going to work. So when I saw in one of his clips, paper clips, he cut, the cuttings, he had something that was called calculation of implied volatility using something called the Black-Scholes formula. And I never heard about the Black-Scholes formula, but I thought, this is interesting. Let's study that. So I proposed it to Donald, and he said, yeah, I also wanted to get into financial markets, do something about it. And coming out of that, floating in the background was the idea of the self-fulfilling prophecy. And as soon as I started digging into that, the suspicion rose that Black-Scholes formula never worked. Okay? It was not accurate to begin with. It was a very nice idea, but there were never markets that fulfilled the conditions that were specified for the Black-Scholes to work. You see what I'm saying? So why did they get a Nobel Prize, these guys? What made them so successful? So we started, this was my PhD. I started basically digging into what made a financial formula successful. And coming out of that was the idea of the performativity of markets, which actually, to be totally honest, I stole almost completely for a different context from an introduction to a book called Laws of the Markets. And the introduction was written by Michel Calon. So the whole thing kind of, fitted really nicely.
What year is this?
1999, 2000. 99, basically. By 2000, I already started doing interviews at the Chicago Board of Options Exchange.
You were sort of part of the creation of this niche field.
Yeah, everything I told you now was kind of how it came about, from my perspective. I mean, if you talk to Fabian, you'll hear, I'm sure, a very interesting story, but from his side, yeah.
So it's been around for about 25 years then, I guess.
Yeah.
There are a couple of names that keeps coming up many times over, right? Yours definitely one of them. It's very interesting to be able to talk with someone who was part of the emergence of a field. But why do you think it's important to study finance from this social or sociological perspective?
Well, first, it's behavior of markets and behavior of people around them is a social phenomena. So I'm going to say something a bit provocative. Who's better suited to study markets? Or, well, not who's better suited. Okay, I don't want to be, showing my sociological chauvinism. But sociologists tend to know about social behavior, social dynamics, institutions. Why shouldn't they study financial markets?
Have you ever come across, I guess, the opposition that perhaps are a bit reluctant to accept the findings of your studies or the social studies of finance? Is there a field who sort of opposed Yuval Millo and his co-authors?
Story of my life, all the time, from everywhere. Well, I mean, that's not true. That's not entirely true, but let's begin with the mainstream finance. I don't want to say they, but quite a lot of dominant streams within that field do not recognize the importance of such reflexive feedback phenomena that markets behave the way they do to a large extent because there are actors within the markets that are able to look at themselves from the outside and say, okay, what am I going to do that's improve my situation? And I'm going to use the theories that people believe about the markets, to make my situation better. You see what I'm saying? So that understanding that theories do not just describe the social phenomena, but actually affect the social phenomena. Because of that reflexivity, because we're not talking about atoms or about, I don't know, some other particles that have no reflexive capabilities. We're talking about people. And people can read theories as well as economists who write those theories. So yeah, that's one side. The other side is, I think I mentioned before, is kind of I don't want to say mainstream sociology because things have changed quite a lot. And I actually left the field of sociology mostly. I mean, I'm still connected intellectually and I read sociological papers, but I'm not in a sociology department. But there is definitely, well, let's put it this way, there is definitely, you're one of many others who do maybe some economic sociology, and economic sociology is just a section within the overall sociology. So kind of almost naturally I found myself in a business school because they care about markets. Maybe for the wrong reasons, if you like the other side, as you said, but they give me space to study that and legitimacy, even though I'm critical of a lot of what people in finance do.
So you're a professor in accounting. Why do you
Yes.
think accounting is the place to sort of allow you to come in? Would you be able to be a professor in finance? I'll put it like that.
Well, I could, maybe there could be some departments of finance in Europe that would think that somebody like me can contribute. Accounting, so, well, okay. A lot of it is, I wouldn't say luck, but some coincidence. I finished trying to think. I did my postdoc in a research center at the LSE called the CENT-CAR. It was Center for Analysis of Risk and Regulation. So not accounting, but studying financial risks. And what I studied over there was financial risk and regulation. And, postdocs are limited in time, so I was looking for a job. And I got a job offer from management school. It was not called a business school yet, at the University of Essex. And over there, because I knew methods well, they said, well, we've got marketing, we've got management, we have finance, and there is accounting. Now, accounting, they don't do research. Well, it's not that they don't do research very well, but they could use an expert in research methods. Let's put you in accounting. Okay, so I was in accounting, but I didn't teach accounting to begin with until somebody, I forgot, could not teach some first-year accounting, and my head of department, I remember that, said, right, Yuval, okay, I think you'll need to teach some financial accounting. And honestly, for the first year, I was maybe 2 or 3 weeks ahead of the students in the textbook. I would learn a little bit more. Like, I'm going to be really honest. So if people from Essex at the time hear this now, well, I mean, I did a good job, but I was sweating a lot. Then after a few years there, I think I got in touch with Mike Power from the LSE. And I told him, hey, I can teach accounting now. Is there a job in accounting? And at the LSE, they had people like Mike Power and Peter Miller, who were very much open to this kind of sociological thinking. And they liked my previous work on financial markets. And they said, sure, we'll have you. And then I started working as a lecturer in accounting. You see, so kind of, I didn't know much about accounting. I didn't know. Very honestly, I couldn't read financial statements. I didn't know what's the difference between a balance sheet and an income statement. I didn't know anything. I learned. Yeah. After that, I became more proficient in different areas of accounting. I did some management accounting, financial accounting. Anyway, I won't be boring your listeners with my occupational history, but accounting is more open to this type of thinking that we spoke about, the reflexivity, because it has less kind of intellectual skin in the game, unlike finance. I mean, so finance wants to say, this is how markets behave. This is our set of theories about how markets behave, and they want to defend them. And somebody coming sociologically is seen as a rival, while accounting tends to say, we capture information about all kinds of events, we record them, we communicate them, and we realize that people change their behavior because of how we record and communicate that information. So they are a bit more they are aware of performativity rather than, kind of being positivistic. So it was a good match.
So today you're teaching valuation. So how does that? I mean, you built a career on being critical of the financial actors, and now you are educating sort of the new people who might go into these areas. Do you see? Yeah. Are you able to bring in your recent research in these courses?
Yeah, okay. I'm going to be super honest. A lot of what I teach and who I teach are going to become part of the institution. And I do teach mainstream valuation techniques and approaches, but I also teach what falls under, which is going to become more and more my expertise in the years, in the last 10 years, which is valuing the difficult to value things. I worked, actually, when I was at the LSES, I began working with Matthew Hall. He's now in Monash in Melbourne. And we started working on the history of social impact measurement. So that kind of brought a different approach for me to valuation. Matt has been working on not-for-profit organizations for many years. I've been working with and still am working with Erica Koslar. She's also in Melbourne. She's at the University of Melbourne, and her PhD was on valuing art. So again, the difficult to value. So I had to start thinking about how do you value something when you don't have a market? That would give you some kind of a signal or some kind of a benchmark. And I teach this to my students as well. So I'm just teaching them now a valuation module in which we go and study what is the value of the environmental and social capital that corporations generate. That's not mainstream. Huh?
Thank you for giving sort of the, again, the emergence of the field, where you're coming from and where you've done the past 25 years.
Yeah, God.
Maybe you can say something, I don't know if you have a story, anecdote, or something that's been sort of the most interesting or surprising thing you've come across over the years when you studied financial markets and their actors from this critical perspective. I mean, I would say even the name of your book in itself is surprising for people who don't know how this works, right? I mean, this inertia that you talk about.
Right. Okay. So if you're talking about the book, okay. So the book is coming out of a research project that Jim Valentine, who's now in Wisconsin in medicine, and Crawford Spence in King's in London, and I have been working on. I did a research with a PhD student, Jan Simon, who's now in Vancouver in Canada, on hedge funds. And we found all kinds of interesting things, but the most relevant to this story is that the structure of the social networks in which people are situated affects the way they trade, because it affects, if you like, the way they know. I will explain. This is something that a lot of people know intuitively, but making it explicit is important. If I think that I know something, I have a hunch. Maybe I want to trade on the basis of some kind of hypothesis that I have in my head, that, Tesla is overpriced and I should short some Tesla's stocks because, their price is going to drop and I'm going to make money out of shorting them. But it's risky, right? Shorting implies some risks. So I'm calling you and I'm saying, Yuan, what do you think? Is this a good idea? Because I trust you and I know that you're very knowledgeable. And you say, okay, yeah, there's a point, and you agree with me on the details. And I think, okay, that's great. Let's ask another person. And I'm calling someone else. Now, that someone else is actually your good friend, but I don't know that. Okay, so I'm hearing more or less the same thing from that person, but actually what I'm hearing is something that you and these friends have spoken about for a long time. So I'm thinking, two different people are telling me the same thing. Surely there's something about it. Good, I'm trading. Now, what happens? The network in which I'm situated, whereby, and my ignorance about that network, okay, whereby my friends are actually friends, it's called transitive, is actually creating a situation where I've got false confidence in what I know. Okay. And this is one of the things that I found. So I thought, surely we can understand markets better by studying the financial networks. Sorry, the social networks in which they operate. Now, I didn't invent this idea. It goes back to much more talented people than me, like Mark Granovetter and others. But studying this qualitatively and understanding what flows in the networks, what are the type of knowledge types that are transferred and accumulated, that was not done effectively, especially not in the, if you like, in the qualitative, but also quantitative accounting field, the ones who study capital markets. So we went out and started interviewing sell-side analysts, the ones who talk with, with investors. So we also spoke with investors themselves, the buy side. And we found what I just said, so this overconfidence. But we also found that the system is very traditional in the sense that it doesn't want to change. It wants to keep things the way they were. It likes its power structure, where people at the top try, not very surprisingly, try to keep their position at the top. And we called it inertia. But note that it's not just inertia, whereby things that are in motion continue being in motion because no one changes them, but it's intentional, right? This is why the title of the book talks about the reproduction or the intentional inefficiencies in financial markets. So it's kind of intentional structural inertia.
Right. So there's purpose behind the inertia.
There is. I want to be careful about that, okay? Because it's an accumulation of many actions that together bring about this, seemingly intentional inertia. But there is agency involved, yes, at many levels.
And you talk about in the book, and I believe also in one of the academic articles that you published about this, that there's that this social inertia between portfolio managers or the buy side and sell side analysts has to do with simple things as they've sort of grown up in the industry together. They sort of, one has been on the sell side and the other one has been they follow each other's career trajectory, and they've gotten to know each other basically. And I don't know if it's from one of your from the book or where I read something that we can't change this sell-side analysts, even though he might not be the best producer of investment ideas, but I know he got kids, or he has kids in school, or whatever it might be. Like you're bringing a lot of different sort of things into your considerations, which as a reader, when you think about the buy side financial actor, that they should be very sort of rational, efficient, and minimizing costs and increasing returns, and here they keep a guy simply for the fact that I've known him. He's a good guy. I mean, that's really interesting, right? It's pretty. If you haven't been, I guess, if you haven't come across this kind of stuff before, reading this is surprising. If you've been taught in what the financial textbooks tell you, and you have sort of a typical finance background, even though you might feel some of this or know some of it, as you said, from intuition or folk psychology, or whatever you want to call it, putting it out there as you guys have done, it's remarkable. And another thing which I would love to talk with you about this, from the active and passive paper, where you look at that, how come, in a sense, the active fund managers, how do they persist, even though this vast amount of evidence showing that they're not able to outperform their benchmark? Could we perhaps dig into that a bit?
Sure. So, in a way, both phenomena that you described are very much related. It's the stickiness of social contacts that you described. Yeah, I mean, that example is in the book. That one may think from the outside, surely economic decisions are following strictly economic utility maximizing kind of algorithm. They don't, because it has. Now, I want to put this out there. This is really important that everyone understands. We're not saying that people are not rational. We're saying the rationality, and you don't need to hear it from us. People have said before, but we just show hopefully, a really good example of that. That rationality is much more complex than just looking at numbers, because people think, hold on, it's really difficult to develop such friendship that involves trust both ways and attendance attention to details. Because if I'm a buy side, I'm an investor, and I've got to use my sales side, trusted sales side analyst, and we've gone, we've followed together a long way. You know exactly what I'm about, what my strategy is, what kind of information I would appreciate, when I would need it. You're great for me, and I'm great for you, right? So it's not just like, oh yeah, I feel for you altruistically. You've got a kid at school, and I don't want to cut you out and stop paying you fees. You're really valuable to me because of this deep, intricate set of connections. The layers of the connections, the way we know each other very well, and of course, these connections are fed and strengthened by going together to have a beer every so often, by becoming friends with our families. And you see what I'm saying? The social and the rational are not separate. They feed one another. Okay. Now, this really relates also to the passive versus active, because in spite of all of this value that comes from the sell side and buy side, it's difficult to predict markets' behavior. Very difficult. So many of the actors on the active side, right, the ones who pick stocks or pick some elements and sell or follow a theory. Tesla is going to go down because of this. Vodafone is going to go up, whatever, all those things. They are facing a much more difficult time because they face how should I put it? A fancy word, an epistemic adversary. They face an adversary in the form of the passive funds. These passive funds basically buy the entire index, the entire market, if you like, and just hold it. Change the weighting of the different stocks according to the price of the stocks, so that they have a nice representation of the entire index. They're not, by definition, this strategy is not going to give you crazy returns, but they're not doing badly because they're just following the market. So this is really difficult for the active side, because the active side lives on ideas. But in passive, you have no ideas, right? You just stick with it. Now, you see, this is why I call it an epistemic adversary, because it really goes against the type of knowledge that they value, that they live on. That they go against the idea, the passive goes against the idea that you may be very smart, and because of you being smart, you can actually outperform the market. And what we found is that they know, many people on the active side know that it's very, very difficult for them to outperform the market consistently. And if you read the book, you see that many tell us, look, my money is in passive. So they sell a product that they don't use themselves. And they also explained why. They said, look, it gives you somebody to talk to, having a broker. Also, this is what they didn't say, but we heard it, in general, it gives you someone to blame. Okay, so if you're investing for an institution, and the broker told you, right, I think we should buy this and this, and it doesn't work well, it's not your fault. It's their fault. Yeah. So it really relates to, I'm just going to bring in this whole thing back. It really relates to the social structure of the market. Markets are made up of people with connections who interact with one another. And to this system, the passive is really alien, because alien is not social in that sense. You see what I'm saying? Of course, there are social connections over there as well, but they follow a very simple principle. We just buy a replication of the market. The active side also told us they actually deteriorate the type of signal we can get from the market, which actually there is something about it. But this is just something we leave out there. We didn't discuss it.
I just think it's a very important question from many perspectives. Even if you take it from your own sort of personal savings perspective, if everyone sort of out there, or the average Joe and Jane, knows that active fund managers cannot really perform, but that's not really the story we've been told when we go in to have these meetings with banks, right? We talk about our house debt, and we talk about, we have $200 every month we can save in a fund, and they say, well, choose this one, and they will recommend, in many cases, a active fund. It does affect a lot of things, the findings from your studies, and I think the fact that you mentioned, and the example you have in your book, that active fund managers that themselves, their private funds of themselves, is put in an index fund and not even in their own fund. Not that it's not even in their own fund, but it's not in a different active fund. Like it's in an index fund. I just find that, I'm not surprised, but at the same time, it is kind of surprising, right? So to me, it's just difficult to see how an industry who clearly underperforms over the long run and continues to do so in more or less any study you look at. And even if you look at the studies that show that this fund produced well this year, they will most likely produce badly or below average next year. It's always this sort of mean reversion. And it's just, and I think it is in one of your papers as well, where it's close to 50%. Some studies showing that close to 50% of all mutual fund money is still sort of inactive and 50% in passive. And yes, passive has taken over the years, but it's still a large amount of the entire market is still in these funds.
Yeah, it's going down. Now, why is it still there? I kind of hinted at that, but I want to just make it explicit. It's a bit of a luxury item. If you have a broker who works for you, you can, I don't know, kind of tell your friends or tell yourself, hey, I've got somebody taking care of my finances. Same way that you may feel better if you've got a tailor who does your suits, rather than just going to the shop and buying something that was made for the average, which is exactly the ETF or the index funds. It's the average. You're not doing better than the average because you're just buying and selling according to the average. So maybe that's the case. I didn't study that. I would love, like if I had many PhD students, I would give one of them, this field and study why do people still follow, why active in this way, the active area still exists, and what stories do they tell themselves to legitimize themselves. Now, I'm not saying that they shouldn't exist, but I think this is something that should be studied.
Yeah. Do you see if we sort of hypothetically look into the future here, do you see the same kind of balance 50-50 going forward, or based on everything, all the people you've talked to over the years?
I would think, here comes in something that we haven't mentioned, but it was looming. Remember, we finished our interviews 2.5 years ago. AI, just kind of generative AI, was just kind of looming over the horizon. I think that AI will change, like many other things, it will change that. And these separation between active and passive, which was already blurred then, there were all kinds of hybrids that were kind of had some active ideas, but mostly passive, and all kinds of mixtures, is going to be blurred even more because of AI. So, for example, you may have active, but you wouldn't have a person running your portfolio. It will be some sophisticated AI, right? So it will be active, but it will be cheap active, because AI is cheaper than, paying the fees to some fancy sell-side analyst and a fund. So my thinking would be that it would continue moving towards the cheaper end of the spectrum. And it will be like many other things, most of us buy suits that come from the department store rather than from a tailor. But still, tailors still exist. One may ask, why do we need tailors? Well, maybe because some of them make really fancy, distinctively different suits, but also because some of the people who buy suits would like to be able to say, that was done for me. So I would think we would see a lot more passive or, non-human.
Yeah, okay. So maybe it's not the distinction between active and passive. It's more about moving towards something that's automated and low fees, I guess.
Yeah, because we see it in law, we see it in tax advisors, we see it with architecture, we see it with a lot of things. You can now go to an basically redesign your house for 20 euros because AI would do it for you, or you could do it for 2,000 euros with a fancy office of architect.
Okay, so that can link us into one of your more recent papers, which is the self-referentiality paper, which was in an interesting setting. It's in a Chinese internet company. It's about credit modelers trying to create a machine learning model that's supposed to predict loan default better than whatever system they used before, right?
Yep.
And so if we take sort of the grand strokes from the conclusion of that paper, can you see the issue of models taking over a bit more? That these expert credit modelers become more, as you write, facilitators of helping the model improve on the model specific outcomes than perhaps being expert interpreters of the data that's put out. So.
This is okay. Of course, I was going to say this is really fascinating, but of course, I would think that all of my work is fascinating. So I'm not here. I'm not objective. But first, this paper that you're talking about is based on the PhD work of Ruan Xu, who's now actually working with me. She went with me in my department in Warwick Business School, but she did a postdoc in King's before that. Yes, the interesting takeaway, there are a few interesting takeaways there, is that when you base your activity in an organization on a system that's opaque, you don't really understand how it works. You are running the risk that you will not be able to also assess the performance of that system. Now, because of the opacity and because of the basically inability, I'll explain this in a second, because of the inability to measure the success or the capability of the system externally, you have to rely on the system itself to judge its own performance. Now, let me explain. If you have the system like the ones we looked at, that Ruan looked at in China, which is trying to predict who are going to be the bad borrowers, the ones who won't return their loans. You cannot really run a prediction and then wait for the results to come in, because you'll be losing a lot of money, okay, potentially. So you need to run something and kind of fly blind in a way until some results come in, and then you start calibrating your system and so on. And the loans can be given to for 6 months, 12 months, a few years even. So you're flying blind for a long time. If you cannot understand the prediction model because it's opaque, it's running on some crazy neural network, that box. If you have such black box situation, then gradually you're creating the conditions. I want to be careful about how I put it. You're increasing the chances that you will also have to rely on the black box to measure itself. Not only that it will do the work for you, but it will also tell you how great it was or how bad it was, which is like a dual dependency, right? You see, it's not only that you don't understand that thing. I mean, I don't really understand how the computer works that is used for us to communicate. Okay. But I can really tell you very easily when the computer doesn't work. With machine learning like that, I can't, because it will happen in the future. And then I almost have to rely on it measuring its own performance and telling me how well it thinks it worked. That's it. So this is the interesting takeaway that I think that I should think that we're not well aware of. And now, as you said, Yuan, it's it kind of relates in an interesting way to reflexive processes or process of performativity, because there is always a loop there. But the loop, well, like before, I suppose, is human and non-human, and they rely on one another. But the kind of here, the relation, the reliance of one on the other is very pronounced and dramatic, namely the human on the machine.
Right, right. So if we try to put that into a financial context, let's say a fund manager, for instance, as you write in your book and you bring up, they talk about that they prefer small data ahead of big data, and I guess the concern with the machine learning and sort of the AI, obviously revolution, if you want to call it that, that's happening right now, could be that many of the issues, I guess, with how it functions today could sort of be amplified. Everything is going to go faster. If you talk about this self-referentiality that might be existent today, even if you're just using Excel to values, a business or whatever. But if you bring big data into this picture and you have these machine learning models, the issues might be that there's simply stuff is happening faster in a way we don't really understand, right? I guess that could be a risk that's coming, or that's perhaps luring underneath right now, the changes that's happening.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's not just the speed, although it's part of that, the degree of dependence. So an Excel sheet, for example, can calculate something very quickly. Yep. Okay. So that's a speed dependence. Like if you wanted to do it manually, it will take you 10 times as much. Okay. So you depend on it, but you can actually replicate what the Excel sheet does. You cannot replicate what these models do because they imitate human intuition, and you cannot repeat your intuition by command. You have an intuition. The intuition comes from somewhere. You're not sure how and why, right? So now we've got a problem, because there's no way we can trace the steps of the algorithm of the model, because there are no steps that we can follow. You see what I'm saying? It's a qualitatively different type of dependence, because it actually takes away your inherent superiority. Let me explain. With tools like a hammer or an Excel or this cup over here, okay? My life would be more difficult if I didn't have the cup, but I can, come up with a workaround, or the hammer. I can use a stone or something like this, or what we said about the Excel. With an AI-based machine learning or other types of AI, I've got a problem, because you see what I'm saying? I'm looking at a result of something I cannot reverse engineer almost at all.
Yeah, exactly. And there might be an issue with accountability then. Who's accountable for the decisions if you base it on, is it model or the ones who developed the model, or?
We have a big problem about that. This is why you rightly said, Jon, that it's a revolution, because yes, you may have difficulty with accountability with regard to, a machine. Like you're a doctor and the machine didn't work and something bad happened to the patient. Surely you're responsible. Okay. When it comes to AI-based investment decisions, I guess, like we saw in previous instances, one has to be made accountable. But the nature of relationship between you and such a machine, let's call it the intuitive machine, okay? It's not the right way to put it, I guess, but just a label, is different from the relationship that you may have with a non-intuitive machine. And yeah, I don't know what are the implications. It's interesting, but I guess, like happens, in law, there are going to be some cases with this, like we saw with those lawsuits that came against, I forgot, it was Tesla, with a self-driving car that was involved in an accident and somebody got killed. Who's responsible for that? The people who wrote the software for the machine? Like, what's going to happen here? It's a very, very interesting area of of agency, of studying agency, what agency really means.
You have studied sort of devices and technology in relation to financial markets a lot as well, but I guess an overarching theme still is that humans are very important.
Well, I mean, I would think, if you don't mind me saying, I'd like to suggest a different way of looking at it, slightly different. Instead of saying there's human agency and accountability, I forgot what you said there exactly, but the human agency that is separate and potentially superior to machine agency, I would like to put them on a continuum, like a spectrum of different, let's say, degrees and types of reliance. Because I think that we lost some of this pure agency that I don't know if we ever had it, but I would like to suggest that if we had it, let's, as a thought experiment, let's assume that some time in the past there was pure human agency. I would like to suggest that we started losing or transforming some of this agency the first time we started using tools or devices, if you want to call them in a kind of fancier way. When we started, I don't know, putting, not we, but our very, very far ancestors took the skin of an animal and put it on top of them because it was too cold. They already became cyborgs in some way. They were no longer pure humans. They were humans, but with a buffalo or a bear skin on them. And then they started using weapons and they had fire and so on. So we were never toolless. So our agency was always tool mediated, right? You see what I'm saying? So AI is yet another area in that continuum.
That's very interesting. I've never thought about it, at least not that far away back with the bear skin or buffalo skin.
Well, it's a tool, right?
Yeah, of course. No, I definitely agree with you. But what about if I just make an example that, let's say I'm an investor, I have a model that does some kind of calculation I don't really understand. Let's say it's a machine learning model. It puts out buy this, sell this, but there's still evidence in the research, qualitative research within this field, that people say, well, you know what? I don't really like this outcome, like this, the output from this model. I'm going to override this decision and not do this. I'm going to do something else. Do you see what I'm saying?
Okay.
Why do we not blatantly sort of just accept whatever's put out from this incredibly smart machines that have looked at vast numbers of big data, which we would never be able to, as you said, sort of reverse engineer?
Well, first, I don't know if we don't, because I'm pretty sure that there are hedge funds out there who do this kind of experiments. Maybe not with real money now, but they just run it on their portfolio and see how well those machines operate. The question, I guess, that comes to that, so I don't think it's out of the question that people would ask it, because I think what would happen, or I don't know, one of the trajectories that AI in financial markets can follow is what we saw with autopilot. Okay, it used to be that 50 years or maybe even 60 years ago, I don't know how far back, that pilots had to be there awake and alert and fly your plane from A to B. Now they are there holding their hands on the sticks and all that, but the machine is doing everything. They're just there for accountability, or if something really unexpected happens. In fact, if you tell people, oh, I'm going to fly from Sweden to whatever, to Japan, and that's going to take 13 hours, give or take, that will be irresponsible, even illegal, to ask somebody to keep awake and alert for 13 hours with such responsibility of hundreds of people in the back, and also however many thousands of millions of people on the ground that you may put in risk if you crash on them. Surely you need a machine. I guess gradually we'll pass this line and people will say, well, I'm not going to let some drunk or potentially whatever, risk-taking broker to take care of my pension fund money. Surely a machine would be better. You see, I'm not saying that it has to follow the trajectory, but look at what happened in many other areas.
If I may have been a bit too simple in my way of characterizing it as a bit black and white, so we either have sort of active or passive, or there's a continuum, there's a lot of interconnectedness or whatever. Like there's different stages to this. It's not like the pilot's not gonna be fired. He will still be there, but the role might have changed a bit.
And you notice that there's a very quick but unnoticeable change between two categories. First category, things that computers will never do, and it switches very back to, of course they do that. It's obvious. Like six years ago, could you speak to your phone and say, hey, please give me the address of a really good restaurant here, and I don't want to pay too much, and the food shouldn't be too spicy? Now you don't think twice about it.
What would be the biggest misconception people have about studying financial markets as social system? Simply, if someone said, well, you don't really need to, why would you study it like this? It's just numbers and...
Numbers are social. Numbers are social. Numbers without the social context mean nothing. The number 7, what does it mean? Well, is it high? Is it low? In comparison with what? In what context? So I can't see any numbers, like any knowledge, that's not social.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on that for people who never have come across this way of thinking about, or this perspective that you hold?
Yeah, well, okay. So I don't know. Somebody wants to study financial markets, great, and they go to a business school and they study all kinds of great theories, which I respect a lot. Very smart people wrote them about how markets behave. They studied CAPM and they studied diversifying portfolios and all of this good stuff. Terrific. They should not forget that underpinning all of these are assumptions about human nature and about how people interact with one another. As soon as they realize this and start thinking about it, they realize that the whole thing is social, and all of these mathematical rules are expressing social relations. This is the, I wouldn't even call it misconception. This is the one blind spot that people tend to have, that there's something out there that just operates mathematically, as if it was the movement of the stars or something like this. It's a different system, as we discussed before. So that's the one misconception or blind spot.
Within this field, where do you see sort of what would be the next things to study if you want to build upon all the stuff you have already done within social studies of finance? Any tensions or puzzles?
One is AI that we spoke about. Another one would be the ongoing, I wouldn't call it struggle, but very interesting field where markets are expected to solve all of our problems. So, for example, solving, pollution through market reactions. I'm not going to make an opinion about that because it's, there are many moving parts. I think we need a lot more research on that, a lot more research. Studying climate change and climate change finance is really interesting, and the impact of AI on knowledge in and around financial markets are just like huge topics and very impactful.
Very impactful, very, very important stuff for sure. If we can end with you perhaps giving me some advice. I'm a new PhD student. I've just started out. I want to really do the most with the time that's been given to me over the coming years, and obviously, hopefully do something interesting.
Well, first, congratulations on choosing that. That's great. Most people don't make this choice, and we need more people who would like to, add to knowledge in academia. I think it's still a great invention, this institution of generating knowledge for knowledge's sake. One of the best advice that I was given was to treat the academic practice as sports, meaning you cannot really expect yourself to, let's say, you haven't run more than, I don't know, half a kilometer, and now you want to run a marathon. That's going to end badly. So you want to write every day. I remember that, trying to remember if I saw it or I saw a video, but when I was a postdoc at the LSE, they had as a visiting prof, Bruno Latour, And, Bruno Latour was a great intellectual, wrote many books, super smart guy. But he also gave us a talk, I remember, about that. You're a young PhD, what should I do? And he said, write every morning. Sit down and write. Get used to writing about difficult to understand things. That will be my advice.
I will take up on that for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. But yeah, thank you again,
No worries.
Yuval.
Thanks.
Very happy to speak with you. I look forward to following up more on your research and I saw that
absolutely.
you published something came up on your site like today or a couple of days ago, which I haven't read, governing synthetic data in the financial sector. So
this is something that I've done with Ruin and with this guy from Denmark. Yeah. So it's about synthetic data, basically data that was created by AI and has got nothing to do necessarily with the real world. So like another element there, if you want, but I still don't know much about it. I'm still beginning, but if you want, at some point we can talk about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna read through that one. I haven't come across synthetic data yet, so it was just learning about that. It's gonna be interesting. So
okay, cool.
But I'm sure I will meet you in person someday, Yuval. Again, thank you for taking the time.
Thanks a bunch. Take care. Bye.